Long before China was one, it was many, not provinces, not cities, but kingdoms. Fierce, proud, ancient. It was called the Warring States period, a time when 7 great states clawed for power in the east. Qi, Chu, Yin, Han, Zhao Wei, and Qin, each with their own kings, coins, customs, and dreams. War was not an event, it was a way of life. Diplomats lied sweetly. Generals rose and fell like thunderclouds. Fortresses lined every horizon. In the far western hills, Qin was considered rough, even barbaric, mountainous, isolated, but resilient, and quietly dangerous. It was here, in 259 BC, under a sky of political thunder, that a child named Yingzheng was born, a child who would become the first emperor of a united China. But he did not arrive in peace. His father, Prince Iran, was a royal hostage, sent to Zhao to ensure Qin's obedience. There, he lived in relative comfort, until a cunning merchant named Lu Buwei altered his fate. Seeing potential in the prince, Lu Buwei maneuvered his rise, offering him wealth, influence, and eventually, a woman, Lady Zhao. She became Iran's consort, and their child, Yingzheng, was born in a hostile land. Far from the throne he would someday claim. But rumors swirled. Whispers said that Lu Buwei was not just the architect of Iran's fortune, but the true father of Yingzheng. Whether myth or fact, the boy's origins were steeped in intrigue. At the age of 13, Yingzheng became king of Qin. He was too young to rule alone, so Lu Buwei stepped in, now chancellor, and for a time, it seemed he controlled the kingdom from behind a silk curtain. But the young king was watching. Qin, under his gaze, was changing. For decades, it had already embraced reform, legalism over ritual, order over sentiment. Its laws were strict, its army feared, its ambitions clear. While the other states bickered, Qin built. Its roads stretched farther. Its punishments were harsh, but swift. Its merit-based bureaucracy allowed even low-born soldiers to rise through valor, not just blood. And under Yingzheng's silent ascent, its claws grew sharper. Beyond Qin's borders, the other states continued their dance of death. Alliances formed and fractured. Battles erupted without warning. Kingdoms were exhausted, militarily and morally. No one noticed the quiet strength rising in the west. At court, rumors of rebellion festered. Lu Buwei's influence began to fray. When a scandal emerged, linking him to secret lovers and plots, Yingzheng acted. He stripped Lu Buwei of power, and soon after, the disgraced chancellor took his own life. The boy was now a king in full, but Qin was not enough. As Yingzheng grew into his power, he watched maps the way a hawk watches a field. Each neighboring state was a threat, but also a prize. Unification was not a dream. It was a plan, cold, measured, relentless. The warring states had bled each other for over 2 centuries. Now one state would do what none had dared, end the war altogether, by ending all rivals. As you rest tonight, imagine the candlelit halls of the Qin court, where a teenage king sharpens both his mind and his will. Beyond those walls, the drums of war still echo, but inside, a new silence begins to form. It is the silence of control, the breath before conquest. Tomorrow, he marches forward. He was only a teenager, but Yingzheng was already ruling with the quiet resolve of a man twice his age. The court had been cleared, the scandal silenced, the old powers dismissed or destroyed. The boy king of Qin no longer needed advisors to speak in his name. He was now the voice, and soon the sword. The year was 238 BCE. A rebellion flared in the royal palace. A cousin's plot, a last gasp of resistance from those who underestimated him. Yingzheng crushed it, swiftly, publicly. He did not forget, and he did not forgive. With the throne secured, he turned his gaze outward. The other 6 kingdoms, Han, Zhao, Yanwei, Chu, and Qi, still stood like weathered stones on the landscape of China. But none had the reforms of Qin. None had the ruthless efficiency of his legalist ministers. And none had Wang Jian, the old general with a mind like a steel blade. War became not just strategy, but procedure. The conquest began with Han, small, vulnerable, and exposed. It fell in 230 BC, a clean cut. Next came Zhao, the very state where Zheng had once been born in captivity. It resisted, fiercely. But by 228 BCE, Qin's army had broken through its walls and its pride. Then Yin, anxious, desperate, launched an assassination attempt. A nobleman named Jing Ke crept into Zheng's court with a poisoned dagger hidden in a scroll. He lunged, but missed. The king struck back, and in 226 BCE, Yin was crushed. Each kingdom fell like a leaf. Each ruler bowed, or was buried. By 223 BCE, Chu, the largest and most independent of the states, mounted the strongest resistance. It fought for its identity. It stalled Qin's advance more than once. But in the end, not even pride could outlast strategy. And finally, in 221 BCE, the last light flickered. Qi surrendered without a battle. The wars were over. For the first time in its long, chaotic history, China was unified. 7 kingdoms, 1 empire, and Zheng became Shi Huangdi, the first emperor. He did not take the old title of king. That was too small, too broken by centuries of failure. No, he was something new, something permanent. The word Huangdi had never been used before. It combined the mythic rulers of China's legendary past with divine authority. It meant not just emperor, but one who rules all under heaven. His court bowed. His enemies were gone. But his ambitions had only just awakened. From a new capital at Xianyang, he began reshaping the world, not through glory, but through control. The legalist system was enforced without compromise. Laws were absolute. Punishments were severe. Order was prized above compassion. He appointed governors, not nobles, to rule the regions. Power came from service, not blood. He sent his armies not just to fight, but to build roads, canals, walls, and in quiet rooms by lantern light. The emperor's mind turned to questions no other king had asked. How do you make a dynasty that never ends? How do you command the future, not just the present? He had conquered the land. Now he would conquer time. But beneath the surface, small currents still moved. Some whispered of rebellion. Some recoiled at the harshness of his codes. And the emperor himself, victorious, unchallenged, began to feel a different fear. The fear of death. But that comes later. For now, imagine the moment when all the scrolls agree, when the mountains are quiet, and one man, standing alone in a palace built from the bones of empires, can say, "It is done." The wars were over, and in the silence that followed, the first emperor of China did not rest. He organized, where others might have celebrated. He calculated, with the 7 kingdoms beneath his seal. Shi Huangdi turned his eyes not to expansion, but to transformation. He would take a land long defined by chaos and make it uniform. Under his command, the script was standardized. No more regional symbols or calligraphy known only to the north or south. Now, every corner of the empire would write the same words, speak the same tongue of power. Weights and measures were aligned. The axle width of carts was fixed, so that ruts in the road would fit all wheels, no matter where they came from. Currency was minted in copper and square hold. Even time itself bent under new rules. This was not art. It was architecture of civilization. He divided the land into 36 commanderies, each ruled by loyal officials, chosen not by birthright, but by merit, service, and loyalty to the throne. No feudal lords, no regional kings, only the emperor. and those who obeyed. To move armies, goods, and information across the vast empire, he built thousands of miles of roads, long, straight, and elevated, through mountains, over rivers, across deserts. At the empire's edges, he began linking older regional fortifications, forming the earliest version of the Great Wall. It wasn't a single barrier, but a living spine of defense and labor, stretching from the western deserts to the eastern coast. Tens of thousands of workers were conscripted, soldiers, farmers, prisoners. Many would die in its making, but their names would vanish beneath the mortar. In the capital city of Xianyang, the heart of a new empire beat with quiet precision. Officials roamed marble corridors, each holding a tally stick, a scroll of duty. No detail escaped the emperor's vision. And yet, this golden age was not golden for all. His rule was absolute. His laws, unforgiving. Even small crimes invited heavy punishments. At court, philosophers who dared question legalism were silenced. Confucian scholars, with their ideas of balance, tradition, and virtue, were dismissed as dangerous relics. The emperor believed in strength, not sentiment. And yet, he still dreamed of something greater. Immortality. He saw the empire as a mirror of his soul. Orderly, immense, permanent. But how could one live forever in a world so prone to decay? In his private chambers, he began sending emissaries to seek the elixir of life. He consulted alchemists who promised eternal breath. He drank potions, swallowed pearls, listened to sages from the mountains and mystics from the sea. Some said they found magical islands where death did not enter. Some spoke of herbs that could dissolve time, but none delivered truth. Still the emperor waited, and while he waited, he built and built. He ordered the construction of a hidden mausoleum beneath a hill in what is now Lintong. Inside, a model of the empire would be crafted, with rivers of mercury, mechanical traps, and beneath its soil, a terracotta army to guard him in the afterlife. Thousands of clay soldiers, each with a unique face, each standing silently for eternity. But that, too, was a secret. To the public, the emperor stood untouchable. His robes were black and heavy, his gaze unreadable. His word was law, unchallenged and complete. And across China, for the first time in memory, peace reigned. Not a fragile peace, but a design one. A peace forged by law, guarded by stone, and held together by the sheer will of one man. As the stars passed over the Great Wall, as roads wound like veins across the land, as scrolls in every corner now bore the same script, the dream of unity had become reality. But the deeper a man reaches into the future, the longer his shadow stretches behind him. And somewhere in that shadow, resistance stirred. For a while, the empire whispered obedience. The scrolls said nothing. The roads hummed with traffic. The provinces obeyed. But in the shadows of Xianyang's palaces, beneath the polished surface of unity, something restless stirred. The first emperor had built a state of order, but not of trust. He had no queen, only consorts, no crown prince named. Only rivals watched. His network of spies, known as the secret inspectors, slipped through the streets unseen, reporting disloyalty from the shadows. Paranoia became policy. Outside the palace, the emperor's rule extended through fear. Inside it, his own thoughts grew darker. The more he built, the more fragile it all seemed. He turned inward, deeper into obsessions. Immortality was no longer a hope. It was a demand. He summoned alchemists, who mixed mercury with jade. He drank them both. He sent ships into the eastern seas, searching for the mythical land of Penglai, where ageless immortals were said to walk among white cranes and golden temples. They never returned. The emperor grew bitter, impatient, inhuman, and outside the walls, a slow rebellion of ideas began. The Confucians, silenced in earlier years, still taught quietly. They believed in virtue, balance, and guidance through example, not force. But Shi Huangdi had no time for balance, only control. So he ordered a purge. Books that challenged the state were burned. Ancient poems, histories, philosophies, thrown into fire. Scholars were buried alive. Hundreds, maybe more, executed not for what they did, but for what they thought. It was called the burning of the books and burying of the scholars. And it was meant to erase all memory of anything but the emperor's vision. In many ways it worked, but fear creates cracks. Small uprisings flickered at the edges of the empire. Peasants chafed under the weight of labor conscription, especially for the endless work on the Great Wall and Imperial Tomb. Bandits stirred. Some governors grew cruel, others disloyal. And in the very court of the emperor, a deeper crack appeared, one not in policy, but lineage. For all his might, Shi Huangdi had no settled heir. His eldest son, Fusa, was noble, scholarly, and respected by many. But the emperor's most trusted advisor, the eunuch Zhao Gao, favored another. Zhao Gao was not just an aide. He was a manipulator, a master of silence and strategy. He whispered into ears. He turned brother against brother. And in the palace, the succession became a game of shadows. Meanwhile, the emperor, now in his late 40s, grew ill, whether from stress, poison, mercury, or time itself. His body began to fail him, but still he traveled from province to province, searching for a cure. In 210 BCE, somewhere in the far eastern provinces, he died, silently, unexpectedly, and in a moment of history frozen in fear. His death was hidden. Zhao Gao, along with General Li Si, refused to announce the emperor's passing. They placed his body in a royal carriage, stuffed with fish to mask the smell, and carried it back to the capital over weeks of summer heat. In the shadows, they forged a decree, ordering Fusu to commit suicide. He obeyed, honoring a command he never questioned. The rightful heir was dead, and in his place, Hu Hai, the weaker, more controllable son, was crowned. Zhao Gao stood behind the new throne. The emperor's dream had not been destroyed, but had been hijacked. And in that moment, everything he had built, the unity, the fear, the silence, stood upon a shaking foundation. The tomb he ordered was nearly complete. The Terracotta Army waited beneath the earth, but above ground, the cracks had become fault lines. And soon, the weight of one man's vision would bring his own empire to the edge. The man who had ruled all under heaven was now just a body in a carriage. The first emperor of China, Shi Huangdi, was dead, but his passing had been cloaked in silence. No mourning bells, no proclamations, only fish rotting quietly beside him in the heat of summer to mask the truth. His grand procession, once a symbol of fear and command, now drifted through the provinces with an empty throne and a lie sealed in imperial wax. When the cortege finally reached Xianyang, Zhao Gao and Li Si made their move. The forged decree was read. Fusu, the rightful heir, was to take his own life, and in blind loyalty he obeyed. Hu Hai, a younger, weaker son, was installed as emperor, but he was no ruler. He was a puppet, and Zhao Gao held the strings. Within months, the empire began to wither. Hu Hai lacked the discipline of his father. He ignored counsel. He hid behind walls of silk while the court twisted in on itself. Zhao Gao grew paranoid. He feared generals. He feared ministers. He feared truth itself. To test the court's loyalty, he once brought a deer before the emperor and called a horse. When ministers objected, they were executed. This was the world the first emperor had left behind. Not a shining monument of unity, but a garden of ghosts and fear. Yet beneath the earth, his truest monument was being sealed. Just outside the ancient capital, at the foot of Mount Li, workers completed a project decades in the making. A mausoleum, buried deep, vast, complex, untouched by light. Its design mirrored the empire. Rivers, mountains, stars, all rendered in subterranean detail. The ceilings shimmered with jewels, set to reflect constellations. The floor flowed with liquid mercury, representing rivers that never dried. But what guarded it was something no one had ever seen. An army. Thousands of life-size terracotta warriors, each carved with unique features, armor, posture. No two faces were the same. Infantry, archers, cavalry, even officials, musicians, and charioteers. They stood in formation, silent, eternal, facing east, as if still protecting their emperor from any threat that might rise with the sun. To the world above, they were unknown, buried, hidden, forgotten. The artisans who built them, many were sealed inside, to protect the secret of the tomb. No ancient text described them. No map marked their location. The first emperor had erased the past to make a future, and now he erased even his own resting place. Meanwhile, his empire was beginning to fracture. The peasantry, burdened by taxes, labor, and fear, began to rise. In 209 BCE, two former soldiers named Qin Shi Huang and Wu Guan, ordered to deliver conscripts but delayed by storms, faced execution for their failure. Rather than die in shame, they revolted, sparking the first open rebellion against Qin rule. Their banner was simple: the people can rise. Other revolts followed, in the valleys, in the mountains, in the same provinces the emperor had once unified. Soon, warlords emerged, old nobility resurfaced, and whispers of restoring the Zhou or even the Chu kingdoms filled the air. The Qin army, once unstoppable, was now scattered, misled, and mistrusted. Even within the palace, the collapse accelerated. Zhao Gao, now desperate, accused Li Si, his co-conspirator, of treason. Li Si, who had once helped write the laws of the empire, was executed by the very system he created. And not long after, Zhao Gao himself was assassinated. Hu Hai, alone and terrified, took his own life. It had been less than 4 years since the first emperor's death. The dynasty he forged, through blood, iron, and will, was collapsing before his tomb had even been sealed by dust. Yet beneath that tomb, the soldiers remained, undisturbed, lined in perfect formation, waiting. For over 2,000 years, they stayed hidden, until farmers digging a well in 1974 struck one, and the earth gave up its oldest army. When archaeologists began to unearth them, the scope became clear. Not a crypt, not a grave, but a message in silence. Shi Huangdi had built a legacy not in words, but in clay. His Terracotta Army had stood through the rise and fall of dynasties, through storms and seasons and centuries of forgetting. He had sought to live forever, and in a way, he had. The tomb still sleeps beneath the earth, and though the world above has shifted through dynasties, revolutions, and ideologies, Qin Shi Huangdi remains in silence, guarded by soldiers of clay, watched by constellations carved in stone. His empire long gone, his shadow still reaching. He was called a tyrant by some, a visionary by others, a man who ruled with fire and order, but who dreamed of eternity. The Qin dynasty, his own creation, lasted only 15 years, a blink. But what he forged lasted far longer. From chaos, he built centralization. From scattered tongues, a common language. From rival kings, a single nation. He broke the feudal model, replacing it with a bureaucracy based on merit and efficiency, a model that would echo through dynasties for 2,000 years. The Han, who succeeded him, revived Confucian ideals, yes, but kept many of his institutions. Standardized laws, roads, taxation, military structure, the foundations of the Chinese state. even in modern times, can trace their origins to him. Even his mistakes became warnings in governance. The harshness, the purges, the suppression of knowledge. Future rulers learned not to rule through fear alone, but to balance order with wisdom, law with mercy. Yet his ambition remains unmatched. He did not simply want to rule. He wanted to be remembered, to become myth, to leave something behind that could not be erased. And so, deep beneath Mount Li, his mausoleum remains sealed. To this day, the central tomb chamber has never been opened, not out of reverence, but fear. Legends speak of rivers of mercury, of booby traps with crossbows still armed, of deadly gases and forgotten curses. Even modern science has detected abnormal levels of mercury in the soil above it, perhaps confirming at least part of the myth. Some believe opening the tomb would disturb balance, that it should remain untouched. A message in silence from a man who demanded the world remember him, but on his own terms. Outside, the Terracotta Army has become one of the greatest archaeological discoveries in human history. Over 8,000 soldiers recovered so far, each with a different face, a silent, enduring echo of a ruler who wanted to carry his world into the afterlife. And yet, his legacy isn't only beneath the earth. It is in the textbooks, in the language, in the very name of China itself. The word Qin, pronounced Qin, is believed by many to be the origin of the English word China. So each time the world says that name, they echo him. In literature, he became a cautionary tale. In statecraft, a blueprint. In history, a contradiction. Was he a monster or a mastermind? A destroyer of tradition? Or the father of unity? Perhaps he was all of these. Perhaps he had to be. For what is a first emperor but someone who dares to write the rules when none yet exist? And so, as the stars continue their quiet circles above Xianyang, as wind moves across the lands he once claimed, as footsteps echo through the silent chambers of museums that display his legacy, the man who tried to live forever has in some way succeeded. He lives not in flesh, but in memory, in language, in architecture, in the idea of one China, first dreamed beneath black robes and a bronze crown. The earth may one day crack, the tomb may one day open, but the legacy of the first emperor will not fade. So now, as your eyes grow heavier and your thoughts drift quietly through time, remember, empires rise and fall, but the stories remain. Good night.